Elena Ward arrives before dawn. She moves through the dim hangar boots, silent on concrete. Oil stains streak her coveralls. She greets no one. She begins the day with routine. Pulling open a tool chest drawer, she checks torque values on nut and bolt. Her hands know these measurements by memory. She inspects rotor parts from a UH-60 Blackhawk. She compares serial stamps. She wipes a mirror finish on a hydraulic line, then holds her breath as a helicopter echoes overhead. Her eyes track its blades. Her shoulders tighten. She tightens a fitting and steps back, just watching the aircraft shrink in the sky. A National Guard trainee appears at the open hangar door. He stands awkwardly, trying small talk about breakfast or the weather. She nods once and returns to work, never raising her voice. He sighs and mutters "grounded girl" under his breath before walking away. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't acknowledge him. Her garage holds stacks of flight diagrams she scans each night under a single lamp. Electrical wiring paths, pump targets, pre-flight checklists stained with grease. They are for a Blackhawk she hasn't flown in years. She situates each paper, flat studies the connections, then slides them under a stack of engine cowlings when she hears footsteps outside. The locals know her only as the quiet mechanic, the one who works before any sun touches the runway. She never joins coffee breaks. She never comments on their lives. She refers to a lost technician as the tech. She locates faults in turbine pressure ratios and fault codes without needing to speak. Her talent is visible. Her past remains hidden. She cleans the landing strips when no one watches. She sweeps tire marks, inspects pavement cracks, and applies sealant with a steady hand. Each movement precise, each sweep purposeful. She knows how runway stress affects lift-off weight margins, though she never mentions it. At lunchtime, she steps outside, wipes hands on her coveralls, and scans the mountains. Her eyes shift to sky corridors where military aircraft often pass. She tilts her chin up and holds that look until sound fades. Then she turns and walks back inside, hands clamped behind her posture, straight, unannounced. She knows the serial numbers of every Guard UH-60 on base. She knows their last maintenance logs and rotor maintenance intervals. She has studied their specs because she once flew similar machines. But she won't reveal any of this. Not a word. Not yet. She finishes the day as she began. She inspects last-minute bolt torques under floodlights, locks the tool chest lid, and climbs into her SUV. She glances upward as another helicopter crosses the orange sky. The trainee joke resurfaces, but she just breathes out and drives away into silence. The call came in just before noon. A UH-60M Blackhawk was losing altitude in the San Juan Mountains. The primary pilot had seized mid-flight. His pulse flatlined and the autopilot disengaged. The crew struggled. Mountain wind roared through the valley at 40 knots. The rotor banked left. The crew was scrambling. Lieutenant Torres stood by his console at the National Guard bay. He watched coordinates flash on the screen. He noticed the aircraft swinging off course. Radio traffic crackled and he clicked transmit. No response. He pressed the button again and repeated radio protocol. Then he closed his eyes for a beat and whispered to himself that this was bigger than a mechanical failure. Backup aircraft were hours away. Weather was closing in. The UH-60M didn't have the range to hold while waiting. The injured pilot occupied space meant for cargo and medics. He had to send someone now. But Torres's mind raced back to flight school at Fort Rucker. He remembered a student who never spoke more than necessary and never missed a check. Elena Ward. She was built for this. He tapped a boot twice and walked out of the bay. He called over the base dispatcher. He needed a civilian mechanic. He needed a UH-60 pilot. He needed Elena. He jumped into a jeep and raced into town. Debris from changing weather scattered across the road. He turned onto the dusty path toward Elena's garage. He found her bent over a filter change. She looked up and worked deliberate patches of oil into rag. He didn't explain. He told her flight status, wind conditions, altitude restrictions. He told her the primary pilot was down. She watched him list the parameters. She turned back to her task. She closed the lid and walked toward the door. Elena climbed into the jeep without a word. She sat straight eyes forward. Torres noted the shift. Her training silenced the civilian posture. It returned in microseconds. She didn't talk. He didn't ask. They didn't need to. He told the tower they were en route. The guardsmen at the airfield stepped back. They saw her uniformed form when she climbed onto the tarmac. Their eyes narrowed. They asked each other if the grounded girl was flying. They watched her open the Blackhawk's flight door and slip inside. The rotor spun up. She completed a quick instrument check with slow precision. She keyed the mic station and spoke with firm calm. Clearance granted. She lifted off smooth and silent as snowfall. Torres followed by Rode. He watched the helicopter disappear into low clouds. He exhaled. The base fell silent. They had the pilot now. They had Elena in the seat. She was the only one who could fix this. Here is the continuation with the next 2 sections following the same style and full length as instructed. The door to her back room hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside was a faded flight suit folded with care. Dust covered the name patch. Elena brushed it, once checked the stitching and zipped it on, her hair tied into a plain ponytail. She checked her boots. Same size, same laces. Her fingers tightened them fast as if the years had never passed. She emerged from the garage in that uniform. Torres waited by the vehicle. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They drove without headlights. The sky above the ridge was darkening fast. At the airstrip, the personnel saw her step out. Some of them straightened up. Others whispered. None knew what she was doing. Then they saw the insignia. Her stride was measured. No rush. Just certainty. She moved toward the aircraft. It was prepped for flight. Nobody had said she would fly, but someone had rolled it out anyway. Instinct, maybe. She walked around it, checked tail rotor, looked at exhaust ports. Her hands touched fuselage skin like memory. One junior specialist moved forward. He asked the question. You've flown before Elena didn't stop walking. She ran a hand over the checklist binder, flipped open the logbook. Flying's not something you forget. She ducked into the cockpit and pulled the harness over her shoulder. Every switch, every knob right where it always was. Nothing changed in the UH-60M. She ran the pre-flight aloud only to herself, a whisper under breath. The crew outside stepped back. They didn't know what she was capable of. They only knew something had shifted. The wind had picked up. But she didn't check weather radar. She looked to the west, scanned the clouds, read them like ink. Torres approached the open cockpit door. Winds bad. Terrain's tight. They're hovering, but losing control. Elena glanced down at the flight map. She memorized it. One look. That's all she needed. She adjusted one knob, ran fingers over comm switch, and keyed the mic. Tower. Request clearance. Rescue operation. The voice crackled back. Approval granted. Everyone stepped aside. The grounded mechanic had turned into something else. She rolled up her sleeves. Her arms bore no insignia, no decoration, only quiet tension. She looked up once. Just sky. Then lifted the Blackhawk off the ground. The rotor spun louder with each second. Elena adjusted collective control, nudged cyclic slightly left, tested the pedals. Her fingers moved like they had thousands of times before. She didn't have to think. It was all muscle memory. The helicopter hovered low for a beat. Then she lifted smoothly into open air. She didn't rely on autopilot. She didn't look at GPS. She trusted the tactile feel of the aircraft, the whisper in the yoke, the pressure on her feet. Her eyes scanned terrain. She remembered peaks, crosswinds, downdrafts. This was her territory now. A crewman in the back asked how long since she last flew. She didn't turn her head. Helicopters don't forget. They just wait for the right hands. She banked left and dropped into the first narrow pass. Wind roared between the canyon walls. The UH-60M jolted once. She didn't flinch. She adjusted trim, checked horizon, reduced throttle, and aligned nose with the valley bend. Every movement was smooth, intentional, calculated. She switched comms. This is Rescue 1. Inbound. Visual range in 5 minutes. The tower acknowledged. Below, snow streaked between trees. She passed over shadowed rock. She corrected for turbulence with quick micro-adjustments. The backup systems were green. Fuel tank read 70%. Time mattered. The downed crew was bleeding time. So was the weather. Visibility dropped fast. Cloud deck descended. She dropped lower right above tree line. No hesitation. She knew this airspace. Not from instruments. From watching the sky every day for 5 years. Each turbine vibration passed through the stick and into her wrist. She listened with her hands. The UH-60 cut through mountain air like a needle. Cold, surgical, precise. Ahead, the rescue site came into view barely. She saw a black shape swaying in place near a jagged ridge. Rescue 1 has visual. They were close. Too close to the slope. The injured pilot was still aboard. The rest of the crew had minimal hours logged. No one could land this bird but her. She steadied altitude. No drama. Just breath. Just balance. Behind her, the crew watched in silence. No one questioned her anymore. Here is the continuation with the next section. The disabled UH-60 was tilting nose down, trying to hold steady. The backup pilot inside had minimal hours. No combat flying. No mountain hours. Elena scanned the slope. Rock fields. Narrow ledge. Gusts crossing from the northeast. No room for a second try. She adjusted pitch, dropped the nose 5 degrees, and began the approach. The gap between two rock formations gave her just under 10 feet of clearance on either side. She didn't blink. She slowed descent using headwind to balance rotor torque. The altimeter dipped. She ignored it. Crew on the ground radioed in. That LZ looks too tight. She keyed her mic flat tone. I've landed in worse. She lowered the UH-60 into the opening down through wind shear, her feet dancing on the pedals. Tail rotor brushed the line, but she kept control. No swing. No skid. She bled speed with the collective, felt the downdraft catch under the skids. She tapped lateral trim. The Black Hawk obeyed. The rotors blurred above her head. Dust spun into a funnel. She touched down. Soft. Centered. The rotor didn't slow. She kept it spinning. No margin for idle. She motioned to the medics. They moved fast, transferring the unconscious pilot, strapping him down inside her aircraft. She checked vitals through the headset. Read the telemetry. Breathing shallow. Heart slow. Time still mattered. While the crew loaded equipment, Elena kept the RPMs steady. She made zero eye contact. Her eyes stayed on gauges. Her right hand on the stick. Her left near throttle. Ready. Outside, a gust pushed gravel against the tail boom. She didn't flinch. She tapped the pedal-compensated held angle. The rescue team gave the thumbs up. She closed the hatch-sealed pressure, flicked to intercom. We're out in 30 seconds. They didn't argue. She pulled collective, lifted the UH-60 straight up through the funnel of rock and dust. The tail cleared with 3 feet to spare. The aircraft rose like it remembered her touch, like it knew who was flying. She turned toward the valley. The flight wasn't over. They were airborne. But the weather was worsening. The way out was longer, riskier, but safer for the patient. She chose the long path, through valleys she had studied every day for 5 years, from the ground, with binoculars, with oil on her hands and sky in her eyes. She didn't need the GPS. She needed the sky. And the sky knew her. Here is the continuation with the next section. The descent route was familiar, not from a map, from memory. Elena turned west, following a lower ridge that wrapped the valley. Cloud ceiling kept dropping. She held altitude just above the treetops. Her passenger groaned in the back. A medic confirmed his pulse was steady, but weak. Elena didn't speak. She eased throttle to reduce vibration, adjusted heading to avoid crosswind. The aircraft rolled once as wind shifted. She corrected instantly. One touch on the cyclic, a tap on the pedals. Balance returned. Static cracked over the radio. Tower asked for position. She answered short. ETA 12 minutes. Low ceiling. Minimal visibility. Stable. No chatter. No panic. Every word was function. She scanned forward. The terrain narrowed. On instruments alone, most pilots would pull back. But Elena flew by instinct. She dropped 5 feet, flew through a break between tree lines. Less turbulence there. She knew. She had watched birds fly it. Fuel dipped. Still enough. The crew in the back held to side rails. No one questioned her hands now. She leaned, left, turned through a natural corridor that curved like a funnel. Wind fought her again. She let it. The aircraft drifted half a foot. She didn't correct. She waited. Wind adjusted. She pushed forward, used the draft to ease into the final stretch. Torres's voice came over headset. "How'd you know about this route?" She answered while watching a weatherbank form ahead. Every mechanic should know what skies they work under. No one replied. The hospital pad came into view. Floodlights. Med crews ready. She slowed approach, dropped altitude gently, balanced RPM with pitch. The skids touched concrete, smooth, centered, silent. Before the rotors even stopped, medics swarmed the side doors. She signaled green, disengaged power, watched her patient carried away. She sat still, didn't look back. Tower's voice returned, respectful now. Rescue 1. Touchdown confirmed. Outstanding work. She didn't reply, just flipped 3 switches, pulled the harness, climbed down. The crew stared. Elena walked past them, helmet under one arm. No salute, no nod, just stillness. In the distance, sirens faded. Her job was done. Here is the continuation with the next 2 sections written according to all instructions. She returned to the garage the next morning. No headlines, no photos, just the hum of a socket wrench and the familiar smell of burnt oil. Elena opened the same drawer she did every day, checked torque levels, replaced a gasket. Nothing changed, at least not for her. But the town had changed. The reservists stopped calling her the grounded girl. They started calling her ma'am, or sometimes just nodded in silence when they passed. One brought her a coffee and left it without a word. She didn't smile. She didn't refuse. A week later, the first student arrived. He was 15, nervous, carried a notebook and asked about basic lift equations. She pointed him to a shelf of old manuals and went back to work. He stayed. He came back the next Saturday. Then another showed up. Then 5 more. She didn't call it a class. She didn't take attendance. But every Saturday morning, the hangar door opened a little earlier. Tables were cleared. A whiteboard appeared. Diagrams returned. They asked questions. She answered. Brief, direct, always precise. One asked how many hours she had flown. She said enough. Another asked why she stopped flying. She didn't answer. She pointed to a diagram of rotor blade flex at altitude. They stopped asking. Instead, they listened. The UH-60M she had flown now carried a line of paint beneath the cockpit. Flying isn't about rank. It's about knowing when to act. The other pilots nodded when they saw it. None dared remove it. She never signed anything. Never wore the flight suit again. But each weekend, students from neighboring towns found her. Some came with notebooks. Some came with flight dreams. One came because his father had pointed at her once and said, "That's the one who saved 20 lives." The boy never forgot. She never talked about that day. But the kids learned fast. Dusk settled over the mountains. Elena stood outside her garage, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the sky. Helicopter blades thudded far off rescue training, maybe. She tracked the sound, not the shape. When it vanished, she returned inside. The boy she once saw staring through the fence now flew training patterns with her on weekends. He called her Miss Ward. She didn't correct him. The town's annual air show returned. The mayor asked her to speak. She declined, but she volunteered anyway. Directed traffic, checked tire pressure, reviewed flight plans for demo teams. One girl stalled on takeoff. Elena leaned in, whispered 3 words about throttle management. The plane lifted clean. The rescued pilot visited once, said thank you. She nodded, went back to work. That night she stood outside again, watched the sky in silence. A single star blinked between cloud layers. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just listened. And then she went back to her tools, still quiet, still watching, still ready. Here is the final section closing the story in alignment with all previous prompts and tone. No medals hung on her wall. No photos from combat. Just a row of labeled drawers, a stack of flight checklists, and one framed diagram of a UH-60 wiring harness. She had drawn it herself. Years ago. The students kept coming. One brought his little sister. Another came after graduating basic flight. They didn't ask for stories. They wanted to learn. She taught them what mattered. Rotor management, weather reads, the silence between static bursts, how to listen with your hands. When reporters asked for interviews, she said no. When a colonel sent her a plaque, she mailed it back. Not every life leaves behind applause. Some leave readiness, and readiness saves lives. Inside the garage, she wiped her hands, set down the torque wrench, walked to the wall and touched the old helmet that no longer fit. Outside, a new group of students waited by the hangar door. She stepped out, same boots, same steady stride. No speech, just a nod. Class was about to begin, and in the far distance, high above the town, a black hawk crossed the sky. Elena looked up, watched, said nothing. She didn't need to. The sky already knew.